Good evening and welcome to Poverty in the Midst of Pandemic with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Somebody's hurting our people. It's gone on far too long. We won't be silent anymore. We rise together on June 20th, 2020, and we declare that everybody has a right to live. And the last thing we can do now is stand down or bow down. We have no option but to organize. We have no option but to mobilize. We have no option but to register and educate people for the movement who vote. We cannot quit. Our very lives depend upon it. And the very future of this democracy depends on those of us who are among the rejected, affected by systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. It is our time to say we will not go anywhere, but we will continue to fight for our own lives and for the very soul of this nation. Welcome tonight as we join in this mass meeting on our way in just a few days to June 20, 2020, the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, a digital gathering. I am the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, joined tonight by my co-chair and sister love, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, and others who are gathered on this call. First, we want to take you inside the movement to videos that will touch your heart and move you to see what we see. And then we want our theomusicologist, Yara Allen, to lead us in song tonight, because every movement, every transformation, every revolution has to have a song and a rhythm.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
I'm here today to share my daughter Venus's story. Venus discovered a small lump in her breast, and she wasn't insured. Venus had to be approved for every prescription and every piece of medical equipment that she needed. I'm standing here today in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign because no one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
Now, I'm also a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide at a far greater rate than the national average. Why? Because they're stressed out. They're stressed out. They're usually in debt up to their eyeballs because they can't pay for all the equipment that it takes to run a farm. And they're in the most dangerous line of work there is, yet many can't afford to buy health insurance. We have no hospital. We are in a food desert. We have one grocery store for the whole county. Our neighbor, my husband's uncle, still drinks pond water self-treated with chlorine. He had to have a kidney removed at age 64. And the year before that, his wife died of some unknown cancer.
Our democracy is in trouble.
Our democracy is in trouble.
And we come to demand.
And we come to demand.
Second warning.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court in this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society.
Everybody say, oh!
I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighter, and he taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
There are 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country, almost half of this nation. And any nation that ignores half of its people is in a moral and economic crisis.
So we will do more.
There will be a movement that will break through the calm and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
Hold on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon. Fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Oh, fight on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon. We've got to pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon. Yo, we got to hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon.
Those of you who've gathered with us tonight, it might seem strange for some people for y'all to sing that particular song, but if you listen to her voice and if you've been around her long enough, you can hear a certain element of cracking, but it's not the cracking from the losing a voice, it's the screaming, it's the part in your soul when you're saying, hold on, but you're also saying, damn it, I'm tired of having to see people, black men, killed in public, crying out for their mama, which if anybody knows our culture, for a black man to cry out for his mama, it means that it was a very desperate and dangerous and deadly situation to be made to feel like a boy, because he could not be a man in that situation. 100,000 people dead tonight, and some we don't even know. And so as we sing a song like Hold On, the history of it is people often sung that song at their most desperate moments, at their most hurtful times. So tonight, as we go through this mass meeting, you feel like screaming. You feel like crying as you test people, whatever, it's all right. Because we're gonna scream, we're gonna cry, but we're not gonna go backwards. For every life that falls, another 1,000 will rise. For every death that comes, will be the resurrection. For every breath that is snatched away, we'll breathe even more and use the breaths we have. History can teach us that sometimes martyrs end up making us what we wouldn't be. It doesn't mean we rejoice in their death. We hate their deaths. We hate death. But it does mean if the forces of evil think that we're going to just die, as Claude McKay says, we will not just die. If they think that one of us dying unjustly is going to make us bow down, there is no place in history where that's ever happened. If anything, the killing of innocent people has put steel in the backs of the movement and has caused people to find reservoirs of the soul that they didn't even know they had. Because to scream out to God is to then receive also the promise of help from another power and another source that humanity and this world cannot undermine. So tonight we come on this call screaming and yet still standing and committing to stand. And I want to ask our powerful members of our tri-chairs to come now, each give remarks, and they will give a 1-minute remark and then introduce in that 1 minute the testifiers who will testify on tonight from Mississippi and Tennessee and Florida. And then at the end, I'm going to do an introduction of Darrell Marks. But would you come, you know the order you're to come in, tri-chairs, and introduce the testifiers. And testifiers, as always we say at these mass meetings, people need to hear your story. They need to hear your pain. They need to hear why things need to change. Sometimes we want to say, you know, well, I made it through this and I made it through it. Thank God for that. But we are a movement that wants to say there's some things we shouldn't have to be making it through. We shouldn't have to make it through without health care. We shouldn't have to make it through without living wages. And so we've got to tell the ugly side in order to push this nation to another side. And so share with the nation, the thousands upon thousands of people that are here that are also planning to join with us on June 2020. Tri-chairs, it's your time now. Each one of you will come and introduce, and then the next one will come. So the Mississippi tri-chairs up, and then followed by Tennessee, and then followed by Florida.
Good evening. My name is Marquise Hunt from Tougaloo College in Mississippi. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Mississippi already had 48% poverty. The African-American community was suffering from some of the highest of worst health outcomes and the 4th highest underinsured rate in the nation, and with limited access to affordable health care. With the onset of COVID-19, these issues that have plagued Mississippi have become conversation pieces and political talking points to those outside of our state. My hope is that our leaders do not get situational amnesia after we move past this devastating global pandemic. As forward-thinking leaders, we must be ever ready to emerge in struggle, better prepared to collectively raise awareness around the same issues that have garnered so much support and fight for the policy changes to end the deep roots of systematic racism, poverty, the war economy, and militarism, ecological devastation, and our distorted national morality. And on tonight, I'm honored to introduce to you Ms. Francine Jefferson from Holmes County, Mississippi.
Francine, just before you come, let me thank Marquise. I made a mistake there, but he's one of our student fellows, powerful young people, 50 of them that are organizing, because another part of this movement is to not simply have a movement, but to see the movement both now and for many, many years to come. So Marquise, thank you so much. Francine, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good evening. So my story is this. 50-year-old Clara Kincaid is my sister-in-law, and she passed away as a result of COVID-19, leaving 4 sons and 6 grandchildren behind. She worked at the Pico poultry plant there in Canton, Mississippi for over 20 years, but their lack of concern for her and her health cost her her life. 2 days before she died, she was tested, not in Holmes County where we live, but at the MEA Center in Canton, Mississippi. Clara was so sick, but she had to drive nearly 40 miles to another county just to see a doctor and be tested. As sick as she was, doctors didn't admit her. Instead, they sent her home, back to our community, on quarantine, and back to the family where we waited for her to die. Why didn't they admit her? I don't know. Why didn't they treat her condition? I don't know. She was so weak, struggling with each breath, coughing, painful coughs, horrible coughs. But now, prior to her death, she mentioned her concerns and her fears about going to work and seeing people who were sick. But she had no choice. There was no PPE at the plant, no health and prevention measures, and no conversations had taken place at the plant. Since Clara's death, they have implemented some changes. They've issued masks and hand sanitizer stations, and they've posted signs telling the workers if they feel sick to take the day off. But these changes are too late for my sister. In Holmes County, residents are often left behind and they're forgotten and essentially voiceless during deadly crises and natural disasters, and now even with this pandemic. There's little to no access to basic goods like household disinfectants and simple basic hygiene supplies, which leaves residents unable to protect themselves and each other from virus transmission. This already dire community suffers from being a food desert, having high poverty, and is now a deadly hot spot for COVID-19. Yet, the state and corporations continue to fail the people, especially Black people. There have been over 600 deaths across Mississippi, which over 300 of them, guess what? They're Black. And we are not disposable. The people in Holmes County and the Delta have proudly and historically been among the freedom fighters for Mississippi, risking their very lives for fairness, for equality, and for justice. Now we must continue this fight and stand together with this Poor People's Campaign, and no, we won't be silent anymore.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you, sister. And no, we won't. And your voice is your sister is going to be well remembered. We remembered her on ABC News, and in her name, we're fighting. Let me ask you one question. Has the state of Mississippi or has the federal government even come to Holmes County and talked about putting a field hospital, having the Army Corps of Engineers, putting a hospital and a testing site? None of that has even been talked to you all, has it?
No, sir. No, sir. Nothing that I'm aware of. No, sir.
None of that. And on top of that, you've had the floods there from the overruns.
That's right.
And Chachula, right?
Yes, sir.
That's right.
That's correct, sir.
And that's natural disasters or actually disasters that caused by human beings and the building of lakes and cutting, right, that then create in rain time. I was there. I'm trying to remember. That's right.
That's right. That's right. Yes, sir.
Those of y'all that are hearing, this is the home of Fannie Lou Hamer.
That's right.
Who said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. This is Mississippi, not 45 years ago. This is Mississippi today, and it doesn't have to be this way. That's why this campaign, none of this has to be. Her sister was one of those that did not have to die. That's even right. as we mourn. And we're not going to let people just act like it was a natural thing. We know God has her now, but we also know that it didn't have to be this way. And we are so honored, Francine, that in her memory and because of your own strength, you are continuing to stand and say, I'm not going to let my sister's life be in vain. Thank you, and we love you so much. Thank you. Our next state leader. Tennessee.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Edith Love. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister in Memphis, Tennessee. Tennessee has closed 10 rural hospitals since 2012, and there are 15 more at risk of closing, a situation made worse by our Tennessee legislature, who have refused to expand Medicare. This violent policy is killing people. Before COVID-19, 38% of people in Tennessee were poor or low income, a total of 2.5 million residents. This includes 52% of children, 44% of women, 58% of Black people, and 66% of Latinx people, 1.8 million white people. A factory is currently being planned in Whitehaven in my city, Memphis, a majority African-American neighborhood, at the site of a closed down elementary school. The neighbors are strongly opposed to this project, but they have been denied a public meeting to raise their concerns. And so tonight, it is my honor and great privilege to introduce you to Frank Johnson, who is also from Memphis, Tennessee.
Good evening. Long before COVID-19 killed almost 100,000 people in the U.S., causing disproportionate suffering among poor and low-income people and communities of color, I was fighting a different kind of disease that kills poor people and minorities: environmental racism. I grew up near the Memphis Defense Depot. It was a military installation built in the 1940s. For over 50 years, the Defense Depot poisoned the communities around it, and they were all Black communities. And I want to make this clear, because our community had every income level. A lot of times I feel that we throw stuff off and we excuse it because it's poor people, or we think it only happens to poor people. But this community had every income level. What we had in common is that we were all Black. And we have some of the highest cancer rates in the country, along with birth defects and many, health disorders, cancers that they don't even have names for. Now, my community was subjected to these crimes because, like I said, it was Black. It caused brain cancer in both my mother and my oldest sister, while causing fibroids in my other sister. There have been numerous causes of cancer in people living on my block alone. This is just my street. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency designated the Defense Depot as a Superfund site in 1992. This is a designation that means that the area is so toxic that they really can't do anything with that site until they can deem it as being able to be cleaned up, or what they call diluted in some type of way, or remediated. At first, I thought that all I was fighting for were my neighbors, but now I'm going to have to join with the People's Campaign because a national moral revival is required. We are holding, I'm getting into the wrong thing. The depot, even though it was closed in 1997, they still have what they call a no-dig policy, because during all of these years, they buried things in the soil that they can't locate anymore. We know for a fact that there were about 3 German bombs that were shipped over from, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and all of these things were toxic and they're still there. In 1998, my mother was diagnosed with a rare brain cancer. There had been no history of brain cancer in our family up until that point. She never recovered from it. We actually thought for a long time that my mother had had a nervous breakdown, not realizing that where the tumor was centered in her brain caused a complete change in her behavior. So my mother goes to, she becomes aggressive. She left, she ran away like 3 times, and she even tried to stab me a couple of times because of where the tumor was. It shifted her behavior. So after dealing with that, around 2014, me and my sisters and my family are just getting over, the fallout from my mother. My oldest sister collapses at work. We take her to the hospital and discover that she has a cancerous tumor in the exact same place that my mother's was.
Jesus.
And it caused the same behaviors in her that it did in my mother. Now, my sister was a nurse, 30 years. She went to nursing school because she was one of those children that had all the childhood ailments. Now we know that those ailments actually came from lead poisoning because of the areas that we lived in. And so we just really began to discover that these illnesses and these sicknesses were connected. And once we started talking and getting back out into the neighborhood, I realized that almost every family in these communities, not just mine, because there were several communities around it, had been affected by that. We had children growing up with behavioral disorders. We had all types of weird cancers that they don't have names for. A lady helped with my father's funeral 3 years ago, and she had an orthopedic leg. Found out that she grew up in the neighborhood as well, and she was 20 years my senior. And so what we discovered is that not only did this happen in my area, but it happened in so many sections of Memphis, the older Black parts of Memphis, that now we are dealing with generations of people that have been lead poisoned, contaminated, and are basically walking down here with impaired mental capacity and don't even know it. We know that lead actually destroys the parts of the brain that actually control and regulate behavior. And I did not even realize this until about 4 years ago when I was teaching elementary school, a school called La Rose Elementary. It's about 4 miles from where I grew up. It's on the opposite side of South Memphis. And every one of my children, every other child had eczema, had asthma, had all kinds of disorders. And what I found out is that this zip code has the highest rate of lead poisoning in the drinking water and has been for almost 30 or 40 years. And so every one of these children that I'm dealing with, they have behavior disorders already, the same behavior disorders that me and my friends had 30 years ago on another side of South Memphis. And so this is the reason why I'm fighting, because it has caused so much unnecessary death in this city. They have studies on us. I mean, Howard University has a 2006 groundwater study on our groundwater that we knew nothing about them doing. And so we have to join together because we see what's happening in our communities. If it affects our community today, it's going to affect yours tomorrow. And so I just have to say that is why I'm here. And we've been fighting for this even before COVID-19 hit, because we have a right. We are humans and we have a right to life like anybody else.
Well, Frank Johnson, thank you. Reverend, and I want to ask y'all a question on that, because we want to be clear, Poor People's Campaign, you know, we challenge our friends, we fight our adversaries, we push both sides of the aisle. Am I right to say that the city council in Memphis is Democrat and the governor of Tennessee is Republican? Am I right?
Yes.
You're right.
And so we got to push both Democrats to address this. Is the city council of Memphis predominantly Black?
It is now for like the first time in
history, right?
Yeah, I think so.
But it means when we get office, we can't abandon community. We got to go back. Sometimes we get in office, we have to go back and do what other people didn't do. Particularly when it affects poor. And I like what you said, not just poor people, but poor, low-income people or people that are Black, because you're facing racism, ecological devastation, and the war economy in that one community. You got a governor who came to the MLK program at University of Tennessee last year, said he loved Dr. King, but he won't vote to expand Medicaid. And we challenged him, and we have to do that. And that's why we have to rise together, because the community in Memphis needs to be hooked up with the community in St. John Parish in Louisiana and other communities, the Apache Nation, where their lands are being poisoned. We all have to hook up together. And thank you for sharing that story and that testimony. And we're going to make sure that we lift it before the nation. So many people in this country don't know what's going on. You know, the first thing you got to do is you got to change the narrative. A lot of people they would say, what? Not in Memphis. All they know about Memphis is that's the place where Dr. King was shot, and after that, everything got better. But that's not the truth. And we've got to make sure that folk know that what's true, because you can't get free until you know what's true. So thank you for sharing, brother. And thank you for what you're doing. Next, we have on the Florida chair. Would you come on at this time, De La Cruz, and then introduce the testifier from Florida?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Guadalupe de la Cruz. I am one of the quad chairs of Florida, and long before the COVID-19 pandemic, the people of Florida have been hurting. Over 9 million people here were already living in poverty. We are suffering displacement, housing issues, food scarcity, environmental devastation, and little to no access to health care. In our state, 60 ICE detention centers hold our friends and families in inhumane conditions, while from 2003 to 2018, over 141,000 people were deported from Florida. And this pandemic has only made these issues worse and has shown how little the lives of poor workers, now called essential workers, are valued, with employees taking no responsibility to provide adequate protection. Now more than ever, we need a Poor People's Campaign to organize movement from the ground up across all fronts and led by people who are directly affected in changing the narrative and building broad support. I'd like to introduce Olivia Williams, a worker and leader in Unite Here in Central Florida. Olivia, adelante.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Olivia Williams. I work at Starbucks in the Orlando International Airport, ran by HMS hosts. My coworkers and I began organizing a union because we were frustrated about the disrespect from the host management. I'm 24 years old and I was hospitalized twice in 2 years from workplace incidents. Once I went to the hospital because of dehydration. We work so understaffed that when one of my coworkers called out, I frequently worked a double and don't get a break until my 10 or 13-hour shift is almost over. The pandemic made things worse. We had no training on how to protect ourselves or the public. I handle cash and cash is dirty. So I started wearing gloves on my own. Worst was that management showed no concern of our safety. By March 24th, 5 TSA agents had tested positive for COVID-19. We interact with TSA every day. We ride the shuttles with them. We serve them coffee. But on that day, my general manager decided to send me to a class with a dozen people sitting together, no social distancing. Why would they risk our health? So that 3 anti-union consultants could talk to us for an hour about why we shouldn't vote yes for our union. I speak up and I told them that management only started paying attention to us when we started fighting for the union. I'm not afraid to fight. I've been fighting all my life. I was born with cerebral palsy and my parents were told I would never walk or talk. Instead, I graduated high school at the top of my class. HMS host underestimates me and my coworkers. But working people like us are strong and powerful when we come together. Now, almost all of us are laid off. Our union election was postponed, but it won't stop us. We will fight until we get our jobs back. Please follow us at Unite Here Central Florida on Facebook and Twitter. Sign up for the Poor People's Campaign. It's going to take all of us working together to change this country. Thank you.
Nas ejita pahagini chef na kaidana bashichin kitlichini dashe ado ashi dashanada tonahali denasha. I am Daryl Marks. I introduce myself by clan because it's important for us to recognize our relationships. And with that said, I want to give my family the opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
Yat she Matthias Marks in the share. She Tohan National Tabaha Bashing Ashi Dashache Nakaide Dashanella Tonahali de Nasha. Good evening. My name is Matthias Marks. I am near the water, born for Edgewater. My mother's father is the Red Bottom people, and my father's father is the people coming home.
Oh, she Matthias Marks, and I am his brother. And so, as we introduce ourselves, we want to make sure that we're acknowledging our relatives, because one of the things that's happening in our home community of Navajo Nation is that there's a large number of positive cases of COVID. Right now, I think the numbers are close to 4,950. We have lost over 160 people to this. And our nation is one that has been in struggle, and it's not something that's new to us as a people. I think that it's safe to say that our people as Navajo have always been in this struggle and this conflict with Western society and its expectations or its manners and ways of being. My home community of Tunalia and shares a profile that's similar to that of many of my communities back on Navajo. And if you're not familiar with how the size of Navajo Nation, it is often compared to the state of West Virginia. Now we have about 360,000 people who reside on that land, and not all of them live in highly populated areas. A lot of them are living in areas that are a little bit more remote, but that remote lifestyle has its own challenges. It's often shared in the media that, you know, our communities don't have running water and don't have electricity, and don't have access to a lot of the conveniences of Western society. And our communities have agency hospital or regional hospitals that are doing as much as they can to combat the onset of COVID and give treatment to the people who need it. But there are a lot of our relatives that are still unaware of just what are the symptoms, because there's so much miseducation that's been presented out there, and not everything translates. And so as we introduced ourselves in Navajo, there are certain translations to that introduction. But when we talk about COVID and how it's impacting our community, not everything translates. And so we have relatives that think that, well, I got a flu shot in the fall, I should be fine. Because when I'm being told about the symptoms, it sounds like the flu, or it sounds like another illness that I might have been in contact with, or having that false pretense that, yes, I know somebody else has it, but I haven't gone to their house or I haven't been in contact with them. And because our communities have minimal resources and have always had these minimal resources, we've always had these challenges where unemployment it has been at 50%, that we have a majority of our community that has an 8th grade education, that we have a lot of unpaved roads and homes that don't have electricity, don't have running water, and the infrastructure is not in place. And it would take billions of dollars to make that possible, because of the remote nature of these homes, that our relatives, you know, have all of these struggles, and, you know, not knowing of all of the cases that are out there, or knowing how our community can be protecting themselves without outside support, or without our children coming home and sharing the knowledge that they've had, we lose sight of a lot of the benefits of having community in place when we're told to isolate ourselves and keep ourselves away from the places that and the people who keep us safe.
And you have all the indigenous youth and elders who are out there, and especially the youth who are so used to not being seen. And in this time, they're struggling with those emotions as well as the historical trauma that we face. When we're told that, we have to look for success out there in the world, we have to get a college education, and we leave the elders behind. And at this time in the epidemic, we're not there with the elders, so the elders are suffering so much from this. Those people that carry those stories, and those people that with these stories, they're suffering so much, because right now we're dealing with the historical trauma, language lost, and the disconnection spiritually, mentally, emotionally, things that we used to know before Western society came in and told us this is how it is now.
That's right. That's right.
And the way we conduct ourselves physically, nowadays we don't even run, because we're told, look, all you need to do is learn how to type, learn how to write, learn how to speak English well, and you're good. You're successful. Go get a college degree. They don't tell us to run anymore in the mornings. You know, you need to spend your time more efficiently, more effectively. You got to get that money instead of coming back home where you need to be, listening to the elders, taking care of yourselves, providing that firewood, providing that water they need.
And that disconnect has impacted our community greatly. And it's needed that the world understand our people and the way that we are, and with more support, more education, and definitely having a voice within, our Western institutions of governance that will help bring clarity as well as help open up the doors for resources to come into our communities as is needed, so that our people can recover and our people can come back together and be safe and still maintain that connection to our ceremony and our ways of being.
And so let me ask you a quick question, and I want to go back to Sister Williams. Thank you so much for saying that you fight, and the people that didn't pay attention until you began to fight. Our dear sisters who said, they said I wouldn't walk, but I fought through polio. But Brother Marks, I called you the other night late because I was so distressed. My part of my heritage is Tuscaroran Indian, but I was just distressed as a human being when I saw the numbers and what was happening, and I was saying, well, how is this? And you told me that one of the things that happened is much of your water was stolen, right? Much of your water. Can you talk about that? Because people don't know that across the country, that 60% of your aquifers were drained to push coal somewhere?
We have aquifers, and that's our groundwater that holds and sustains our way of life in that area, in that region. And we've had resource extractions take place where we've had power plants and coal mines and different mining like of uranium and other materials and minerals that have impacted our environment, that have polluted the water, polluted the air, but have drained our aquifer to an extent where we in our own home communities have dry wells, have dry water sources and ponds. And so our community has to commute to different places where water is held and can be distributed. And some of our family have to drive 50 miles one way just to get water. Mm-hmm. And so you start to prioritize with all of these impacts. And yes, we are a blessed people because where we exist have 4 bodies of water that encompass what we call home. But our rights, our water rights and our access to water sources have been taken through federal and state legislation and agreements where we've signed away water rights in order to get resources.
Right.
Support our community. Yeah. And so it's always been, we have to give so much in order to see so little.
Yeah, you give what's yours in the first place. And like the Apache people, you all still live under treaties and things that are war treaties from the 1800s. Most people don't talk about that. That's why in the Poor People's Campaign, when we listed our 5 interlocking injustices, the one on systemic racism, we made sure systemic racism, when we talk about racism, we're also talking about the racism toward First Nation people. We're not just talking about Black folk, because we have to do that. We have to broaden this understanding of what we mean by systemic racism. And those of you who were the first who suffered under the genocide of this nation, and that's why the Navajo people, the Apache people, and others are coming together, and people, white and Black, are coming together with everybody in this campaign. And I want to thank you and your sons for sharing the nation, but also for being there on June 20th. We have to do this together. We have to do this together. It's been too long that people have been over here fighting and over here fighting. I have to have as much appreciation for your history as my own history, but also to say that what has been done to the Navajo people has been done in my name, because people do it in the name of the state. And I didn't give them permission. We didn't give them permission. And so we're uniting together to push back. And the first pushback is to to show the world what's that, because so many people don't know it. Just like so many people don't know that if Native First Nation people and Black people and poor white folk were to join together, in certain ways, we could be a powerful force for change.
Indeed.
It doesn't take everybody, but it's going to take somebody. And so let me thank you and your sons tonight. Let me thank you. I think you're going to be tested for one of the ones on June 2020. You should be getting a call soon about that. And so where we talk to the whole world and we rise up together, because somebody's been hurting our brothers and sisters. It's gone on far too long. and we won't be silent anymore. Your sons are my sons are your sons, and we're going to stand together from now on. We're not going to be apart. God bless you all, and thank you. Thank you so much. Chiha, is that how you say it? How do you say it?
Yeah.
Okay, and when I can hear it better, you're going to teach it to me, okay?
I will.
All right, and I'm going to teach you some Tuscarora. All right. Video, somebody's hurting our brother. You've heard these powerful testimonies. Now, we sing what we believe. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Oh, somebody's hurting our brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting our brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Have you heard somebody wants to build that wall, y'all, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. Just your voices start clapping, and we won't. And we won't be silent anymore. Last time, all together. And we won't be silent
We are singing as we fight. That is theomusicology, not just singing, but when we call on the divine in all the forms of the one God in many names, and we declare in rhythm and in revival that we won't be silent anymore. Now, we have a team of epidemiologists, public health specialists that have been helping us look at the truth around COVID, the truth that often we aren't telling, and examining all of the bills that are out there, Democrat and Republican, and raising questions. Because what we know, many of the stories we heard tonight, there's not a piece of legislation out there yet that addresses these issues. And we can't be silent. We can't be finished until it does. And so Dr. Sherelle Barber is coming at this time to share with us from our committee that has been helping us, our Public Health Justice Advisory Committee. Would you come at this time?
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Good evening, movement family. This past week, our country reached a grim milestone as this deadly virus, COVID-19, and the reckless inaction of this government has led to over 1.7 million confirmed cases and over 100,000 deaths in less than 90 days. Unnecessary, avoidable deaths. The New York Times marked this incalculable loss by listing the names of 1,000 individuals who have lost their lives, a mere 1% of the casualties. The names of 1,000 individuals connected to families, the names of 1,000 individuals connected to communities, And if these deaths were not enough, the murders of unarmed Black women and men at the hands of white supremacists have proven once again that the society is bent on our destruction. Our collective humanity calls on us to bear witness to this death, to grieve and mourn the loss, but also to act. We have said as a committee and along with other public health experts that the level of death due to COVID-19, which surpasses every other country in this world, did not have to be this way. A recent study from Columbia University estimates that 36,000 lives could have been saved had this government acted just 1 week sooner than it did. 36,000 lives that are the result of inaction. And some projections estimate that by September 1st, we will experience another 100,000 deaths. Scientists and public health experts agree that contrary to popular belief, this pandemic is far from over. What's even more sickening is that despite the fact that these numbers continue to rise, and despite the fact that we have wasted time and currently have no plan in place to mitigate the impact of this pandemic, the federal government and states around the country are moving swiftly and recklessly to fully reopen the economy. There's no coordinated universal plan for increasing testing. There's no coordinated universal plan for extensive contact tracing. And there's no coordinated extensive plan to ensure that everyone has safe and humane conditions to self-isolate. Essentially, we are relying on incomplete data and have no real plan to protect the health and lives of the citizens of this country. Earlier today, I was so deeply disturbed to see the Surgeon General in a video promoting hand washing and mask wearing, as if to suggest that these individual actions will protect us from the failures of this government to ensure our collective well-being. But not only that, across this country, we have denied essential workers, from McDonald's to Amazon, to meat processing plants, to healthcare workers on the front lines, the basic safety protections, fundamental rights, and wages they need to avoid getting sick and to ward off economic hardship. We have left prisoners and immigrants in detention centers to die, and elders in nursing homes, and those without homes to have been left to fend for themselves. As a nation, we have failed our poor communities and communities of color, from Black communities, from Native American communities, from Latinx communities, in urban and rural areas alike. And we have failed to continue to put, to put profits before the lives of the people. There is no question that as states move towards full reopening, that the burden of this pandemic will shift even the more to the most inequities that are already staggering will become worse. From a very basic public health and a moral standpoint, the degree to which the powers that be are attempting to circumvent science, manipulate data for their own self-interest, and abdicate their responsibilities to protect the well-being of the citizens of this country and ensure an equitable and just response to this pandemic borders on a genocidal level of neglect. This fight is far from over, and we need the power of the Poor People's Campaign now more than ever. My colleagues and I are convinced that this moment requires a movement both in the midst of this crisis and beyond. It's the only thing that will save us. There is no public health remedy that can replace the need for the kind of power building, grassroots organizing, collective action, and radical transformation this movement is calling for. I want to close with a quote that has helped me to get through these dark and perilous times. Hear the words of Arundhati Roy, a human rights activist from India. She says this: historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world, and ready to fight for it. It's time to fight. Justice demands it, and our lives depend on it. And as I've said in past meetings, pulling from the knowledge and the brilliance and the power of my colleagues in Brazil, you so porque nos somos, I am because we are, forward together, not one step back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sherelle, and thank you to your team that is being very clear that we must have, if we needed it before, we certainly need it now, a movement, a mass mobilization with transformative power and radical intentions to shift this nation. That is why this movement not only has demands and testifiers, but we have clear, testifiers and critiques, but we have clear demands to turn things from where they are to where they ought to be. Here are our demands, and then hear from our co-chair, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris.
Everybody
Has a right
to live.
The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has come up with a series of demands.
I know that you are here for the same reasons we all are here, to put our elected officials on notice. We demand an immediate restoration of the Voting Rights Act. We demand an end to racist gerrymandering. We demand a reversal of state laws that prevent municipalities from raising minimum wage. We demand a just immigration system. We demand a timely citizenship process that guarantees everyone the right to vote.
We demand an end to military aggression and warmongering. We demand a stop to privatization of military budget and any increase in military spending. We demand a ban on assault rifles and a ban on the easy access of firearms. We demand an end to federal programs that send military equipment into local and state communities. We demand that the call to build a wall at the U.S.-Mexico border be ceased.
We demand a ban on fracking, mountaintop removal, coal mining, coal ash ponds, and offshore drilling. We demand a ban on all new pipelines, refineries, and coal, oil, and gas export terminals.
We demand an immediate implementation of federal and state living wage laws. We demand the right for all workers to form and join unions. We demand equal pay for equal work. We demand a guaranteed annual income. We demand fully funded anti-poverty programs that protects the welfare of us all. We demand decent housing. We demand free tuition. We demand equity in education. We demand an end to the resegregation of schools. We demand equitable funding for historically black colleges and universities. We demand relief from crushing household, student, and consumer debt. We demand the repeal of the 2017 federal tax law. And we demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share. We believe that we can win. We believe that everybody has a right to live.
I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latinos, join hands of progressive whites, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land, and together from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. As we all know and have heard all the more tonight, these are dark and dangerous days. Racist violence, more than 100,000 dead from COVID-19, poverty deepening and spreading. Unemployment is officially at 41 million, higher than during the Great Depression. And the shanty towns and Hoovervilles of the 1930s should remind us that mass homelessness and Trumpvilles are just on the other side of mass unemployment. Just this week, moratoriums on evictions have begun to expire. In my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, upwards of 40,000 eviction notices are poised to be sent out just this week. Meanwhile, as we in the Poor People's Campaign are all too well aware, as we heard from Dr. Sherelle Barber this evening, the government has blundered through a string of relief packages that have injected trillions into Wall Street, gifted massive tax cuts to the wealthiest of Americans, while excluding millions of us from even the most basic stopgap protections. For too long, our society has looked to the rich who wield their power through violence for answers to the problems they so often create and benefit from. But we, in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival, have another message. Follow the leadership of those who were living in a depression before COVID-19 hit, who are organized in more than 40 states across this country, rising up for June 20th for a mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington. This novel pandemic has already galvanized waves of bold collective action on the part of the poor and the precarious. Entire communities are taking life-saving action, practicing nonviolent civil disobedience. In April and May, millions did not pay rent. In Minneapolis and cities across the country, protesters are taking what they need to survive, resisting a death-dealing racist society. And indeed, it is the collective action that poor people and those most impacted by injustice take together in a broad fusion movement with people from all walks of life. That is the only thing that can bring about a moral revolution of values, improving life for the better, for the poor, and for everyone. From abolition to the industrial union movement of the 1930s to the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, from the Underground Railroad to the unemployment councils to freedom rides, people on the receiving end of injustice do not wait to be saved, but take heroic action born out of necessity. And today there is a freedom railroad rumbling underground all around us. It has stops in the Amazon warehouses and the fast food stores, the Starbucks that we heard about tonight. It has stops in the immigrant communities that are protecting themselves against ICE raids in the midst of stay-in-place orders. In the cities where people are winning moratoriums on water and utility shutoffs. In the housing developments and on hospitals where thousands are demanding that housing, that healthcare are human rights. We hear it in the cries that the Poor People's Campaign has been making to stay in place, stay alive, organize, and don't believe the lies, where thousands upon thousands of us have called for non-cooperation with decisions of governors and the Trump administration to recklessly reopen states for business, putting the poor and the sick in harm's way. And we've demanded that Congress go back to work to provide real relief, put forward a bill centered on the needs of the homeless, the undocumented, the low-wage worker, the uninsured. This is the kind of leadership to follow through this crisis. To revive American society, it will have to be from the bottom up. And so we will rise together on June 20th for the mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington to hear the stories and solutions to the pandemics of systemic racism and poverty, ecological devastation, militarism, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. I end with a quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King from his speech, Why We Must Go to Washington. And while we are not physically going to Washington on June 20th, Washington, D.C., here we come with our voices, with our tweets, with our calls, with our demands, with our power. Dr. King said, by the thousands we will move. Many will wonder where we are coming from. Our only answer will be that we are coming up out of great trials and tribulation. Some of us will come from Mississippi. Some of us will come from Cleveland, but we will all be coming from the same conditions. We will be seeking a city whose builder and maker is God. And if we will do this, we will be able to turn this nation upside down and right side up. We may just be able to speed up the day when people everywhere will respect the dignity and worth of human personality, and all will cry out that we are children of God.
Amen, Liz. We are children of God. That's who we are. People made in the image of the divine. And we refuse any longer to be treated like stock or to be called names like essential that really are just a cover up for being expendable. We're coming to this mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington as a digital gathering. We have a way that every legislator, every congressperson, every governor will be touched and told to tune in to hear a new narrative. We're changing the narrators, as you often say, Liz. The first thing, in order to have a transformative movement, you have to have a transformative story. You have to have a transformed prophetic imagination before there's ever a transformed implementation. And imagination many times has to be changed by those, as you said, who live in and amongst the pain every day. Those who fight through, not just suffer through, but fight through the systemic racism, the systemic poverty, the ecological devastation, the war economy, and who are bruised because of the bad theology that seeks to, of religious nationalism that seeks to consecrate injustice and seeks to bless evil. And so on June 2020, we need everybody to get somebody and to tell them to be here. People that may not be for this. We want people that are not necessarily with us, because we believe if they hear the voices and see the faces of people impacted, it will shock their conscience. If they have a conscience, it'll be shocked. And even if they don't think they have one, it'll be shocked. So we want folk to tune in, whether they are friends or adversaries, because we're looking for transformation and change. On this day, it's not an end. We're not saying June 2020 solves it. We're saying June 2020 says on the day before the summer solstice, we intend to break it wide open in this country. We intend to expose this to the light, because only light can really drive out the ugliness of darkness, as others have said. And this is, we're not going back, and we are not going to be silent anymore. For those of you from Tennessee, this is the time for resurrection. That your state has been known too long as the place of crucifixion. We need thousands upon thousands of people tuning in from Memphis. We had planned to be in Memphis tonight, because the last time the movement was in Memphis, it was shot down. We were planning to be there and then to leave from there and go to June 20 physically, because we need to move from that place of crucifixion to a place of resurrection. The best way to honor our past martyrs is to imitate them. The best way to honor those that died before us, those welfare rights workers who really inspired Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel and Cesar Chavez, is not just to talk about what they did in their time, but to do more of what they did in our time. That is the way we honor them. And we are going to build power. We're building power all over this country. All over this country, by the thousands, we're building power. People who register for this movement to vote. We've done the research, and we found out that poor and low wealth people hold the political calculus, the numbers to change the political calculus in this nation. Too many of them have not come out because they've only been invited to a party, or they've only been invited to vote for a personality, but we're inviting them to a movement, and to be engaged in that movement, to not only vote before the elections and then during the elections, but to stay engaged after the election, because change has to come. And tonight, Liz, as I was thinking about this, I was reminded again, as I was last time, that one text in Jeremiah that says all of them are greedy and all of them are lying. Chapter 6, verse 10, they all practice deceit, and they try to dress the wound of God's people as though it was not serious. One text says they want to put Band-Aids on the wound and say peace, peace, when there is no peace. And God says because of that, they will fall. This movement is saying that too many people for too long have been too comfortable with other people's desperation and other people's death. Too many people have been too comfortable too long with other people's death, and it's time for that to be over. We know that there are many wounds. There are many wounds. We have a lot of wounds. We don't have scratches. You know, a scratch is just a mark. But the definition of a wound is it injures living tissue. And we have too many living people who've been injured, cut, hurt by the policies of injustice. We got 140 million wounds in this country. 140 million poor and low wealth. We got 50% of our children living in poverty and low wealth, wounds. 80 million people without insurance or uninsured, and another 13 million that are going to be added because of the gross unemployment during this pandemic. Wounds. We've got all these wounds. 100,000 people dead from a virus that did not, the way they did not have to. That's wounds. But then we have, by June, we'll have 125,000 people dead because of poverty and low wealth. Because even before COVID, 700 people were dying a day from poverty and low wealth and low income, 250,000 a year. Wounds, wounds. And we have to decide that we can't accept the wounds anymore. And we cannot be a nation that just tries to put a little Band-Aid over wounds. So this movement is saying, like the prophet was told by God to tell the people, Band-Aids are no longer acceptable. Band-Aids are no longer acceptable. We want our wounds to be healed. We want full health care for everybody because we have wounds that need to be healed. We need living wages for everybody because wounds need to be healed. Band-Aids are no longer acceptable. We need a basic annual income for everybody, because wounds are no longer accepted. We need our wounds to be healed. We can no longer tolerate celebrating our First Nation culture as a tourism gig. And we refuse to give our First Nation brothers and sisters all that they deserve from what is theirs in the first place. We no longer will accept wounds. No more wounds. No more cute conversations. No more wounds. No more talking about what we can't afford when we have seen this nation find trillions of dollars in less than 60 days. And 84% of it went to the corporation and not to the people that are hurting. We refuse to accept Band-Aids anymore. How in the world can you have a pandemic and not change the healthcare system to help everybody? That's a Band-Aid. To say, we'll give you a little PPE, maybe. We'll give you some sick leave, maybe. But we're not going to transform the healthcare system in the middle of a pandemic. We refuse to accept these wounds, and we refuse to accept just Band-Aids on these wounds. We refuse to accept any more Band-Aids, like having MLK celebrations once a year, but not doing the things MLK told us to do, ensuring voting rights, guaranteeing wages and basic income, and dealing with the military-industrial complex. We refuse to accept wounds being treated with Band-Aids. We refuse to accept Band-Aids calling people essential workers while you force meat packers to go back to work, but you refuse to use the Defense Production Act to make sure that those meat packers have everything they need, the protection equipment, the sick leave, the good unemployment, the health care. We're tired now of the Band-Aids. And we know that this nation can do better and must do better. And so this movement is about saying there are real wounds in America, but they are not beyond healing. But we can't heal them with Band-Aids and light covering and acting like all is well. This movement is to say to America, all is not well. It could be, but it isn't. And we cannot be silent anymore. And so we know that if we don't provide in this nation real treatment and real healing, if we keep applying Band-Aids to wounds, God says it, not Liz Theo Harris, not William Barber, but God says, if you keep applying Band-Aids to wounds, you will shut down your own nation. That's exactly what the scripture says, that if you keep lying to the people, and if you keep applying Band-Aids to wounds and not addressing the issues, listen to what God says in verse 12. It says, so they will be among the fallen, and they will be brought down when they are punished, says the Lord. In other words, no nation can stand wounds but so long, because wounds create infection. And what may be a wound among one people will eventually spread through the whole society. The whole place will be infected. And so this movement really is trying to be like an ambulance to this nation. This movement is trying to be like a good doctor to this nation. And a good doctor tell you where you're really sick. A quack will tell you you're all right and send you home. But a good doctor will say where you're really sick. And then a good doctor will provide that which is necessary for complete healing and not just cover up with a Band-Aid. And so in a real sense, this movement and poor and low wealth people in this country still love America enough to try to save her. They still love this nation enough to try to save her. And that's why we cannot turn around. We cannot stand back. We have to demand, we have to expose these wounds, and we have to demand that real healing take place. And we cannot accept these Band-Aids anymore. No more. No more. This movement is saying Band-Aids, no more. We need a bomb. We need a bomb from Gilead. We need economic healing. We need moral healing. We need healing from the racism. We need healing from this defense economy, and we need healing from this false moral narrative of religious nationalism. And so those that are in the campaign, we understand that sometimes you have to become wounded healers. Sometimes the wounded have to lead the way. Sometimes the wounded are the very ones that have to cry loud and spare not and say that enough has not been done. So we can't be silent anymore, because if these wounds continue in America, America will become septic more than it already is. And no nation can live but so long when racism and poverty has poisoned its blood system and poisoned its democracy. But there's a way out, America. And the way out is to stop lying, tell the truth, and let's do what we need to do to provide real healing and not just Band-Aids. And so on June 20th, MSNBC is letting us have their entire platform. On June 20th, we've emailed already. We've sent out to more than 50 million people. On June 20th, 45 state coordinated committees, 16 denominational religious groups, over 100 organizations are all organizing for June 20th, telling people to tune into this digital gathering. We have over 50 fellows that are working on college campuses around this country. You'll hear from over 50 testifiers who will tell their own story and point the way forward. This is not a gathering for us to be doing a lot of talking. It's a gathering for the people, a gathering to hear the voice of the people.
Right.
We have some actors and activists who have said they don't need to speak. They just want to tell people they're coming and tell them to come where they're coming, like Jane Fonda and Erica Alexander and David Oyelowo, who played MLK on Selma, and Joan Baez, who was there in the 60s, and many others who are coming, Danny Glover and Wanda Sykes. They're saying, look, I don't need to speak, but I'm going to tell everybody, use my platform, because it's time that we hear the voice, we hear the healing that is in the lips of poor and low wealth impacted people in this country who know what healing this nation needs. Joy Reid will be there. Ali Vashi will be reporting from there. Roland Martin, Mark Thompson, former Vice President Al Gore, not to speak, but to call all of these bodies of people. Because if the wounded speak right, we believe if America can see the depth of its wounds in the faces and hear it in the voices of the people, then it has the ability possibly to turn some hearts, turn some minds, and we can change this narrative. We can build power. Because if we can't do it now, in the face of all this death, then God help us. God help us. But I, for one, Liz, and I know you, I've decided that if I got to live, I'm going to be on the side of truth. I ain't going to be with those lying prophets. If I'm going to live, I'm going to be on the side of being a wounded healer. I'm not going to be a Band-Aid placer. If I'm going to live, when it's all over, I want the Lord to at least say we tried to heal some of this stuff. And I know and I believe that God is going to make something transformative come out of our desire to address the sickness of this nation. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, God says, then I'll hear from heaven. Well, God, there's some people that are turning, and there's some people that are hearing, and we won't be satisfied with Band-Aids anymore. God bless you. My brother, lead us in prayer. Come off mute.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is the Reverend Father Charles T. Myers, and I am the pastor of the Episcopal Church of St. John the Baptist in Orlando, Florida. We are the historic civil rights church committed to community rights. I am also the chair of the Poor People's Campaign of Central Florida, and I just invite everyone to pray with me as we go to the Lord and hear him and hear as he hears us. Let us pray. God of love and truth, we lift up to you 140 million of your people who are being abandoned in the midst of abundance, and the millions more being impacted by this public health crisis. We remember especially the 100,000 lives lost so far to the coronavirus in the United States, and the 250,000 who will die from poverty this year. Grant us wisdom to know that plague in the Bible is not a storm weathered before a return to normalcy. It is a call to come together in new ways in order to survive, to hold the power responsible for unjust policies and lies, and to rebuild foundations of love and of justice. Holy Creator, be with us as we stay in place, stay alive, organize, and resist the lies of political and religious authorities who would sacrifice lives of so many to protect the profits of so few. May we remember that Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor and poor in breath, and those who cry out, 'I cannot breathe,' because they belong at the center of God's reign of justice on earth." Grant us the courage to press on as we resist the degradation of human life and the temptation of the powerful to profit from this pandemic. Embolden us to hold out a visionary agenda, take bold prophetic action, raise up a new and unsettling force, and bring about a moral revolution of values. Grant us the love to do your will, to preach good news to the poor, and comfort to the broken and the brokenhearted. Help us to follow the instructions of your prophet Jeremiah, as he told us to do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the faithless, or the widow. Do not shed innocent blood. And since all of this is your will, may we make it so. May we make it so. May we make it so. Amen, amen, and amen.
We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are here.
And we are here.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
For liberation.
For liberation.
And we got nothing to lose.
And we got nothing to lose.
But our chains.
But our chains.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling